When Wolf Enid awoke and her eyes snapped open, she noticed something was wrong. Her mate was gone. She bolted upright and sniffed the air. This couldn't be right. Her mate was always with her when she was transformed. Always with her when she awoke. She whimpered as she could smell her mate's scent, although it wasn't fresh. Her eyes snapped to the other girl in the room, a brunette who was laying on the bed opposite. She could sense she was kin. "Hey," she said gently. "Wednesday will be back soon," she said quietly. But it wasn't enough to sate the anxiety flowing through her right now. And she bolted up from the bed and tore from the room. She bolted through corridors of wood and stone in record time, sniffing the air as she did so. Some other students gave her weird looks as she followed Wednesday's scent. Until she came across something different at the bottom of the staircase. Blood. Recently shed too. She leaned over to intake the scent and found it to be vile and disgusting, and it was intermixed with her mate's, which caused a growl to bubble from her throat, her eyes briefly turning yellow in the process. The blood inside her boiled. The snake had messed with her raven at the base of the stairs that led to their nest. She rose back onto her feet. Her form was different than normal. The wolf knew this, but it would not stop her. Her claws extended, and the instinct to protect what was hers and hers alone drove her forward. She stalked the corridors, a look of unhinged rage, more animal in nature than human, upon her face. She was hunched forwards as she stalked forwards, so intent on the warpath to hurt the snake, she barely missed Wednesday leaving the library behind her. She followed the scent of cheap deodorant and weed and the smell of dried paint. Noticing that the latter scent was that of her mate's other rival, the anger was now unstoppable. Kill. Protect. Kill. Protect. She had nearly done it once before with the hide. She would do it again. But this time, there would be nothing to stop her. Kill. Protect. Kill. Protect. And then she would present the head of the snake to her mate and show her of her prowess. Prove her worth as the only one for her, and finally claim her and create a nest where she could keep her little raven safe. That instinctual need drove her forwards and towards Ajax's dorm. She growled and charged at the door. The reinforced wood buckled under the collision. Cries of "what the fuck" came within the room. The gnashed her teeth in fury as steps within became fainter and fainter as they moved further away from the door. She charged again. The door began to buckle under the strain, giving way to the strength of the enraged werewolf. Particles of dust and granite cascaded from above, the wolf's strength jostling them loose as her shoulder struck the door once more. She howled in fury, her claws elongating, hardening, sharpening. The purity of her feelings coming to the forefront, not only because of the anger and the rage that bubbled there, but as it reached a natural crescendo it came down to a long-suffering whine, a lament, a howl of rage giving way to sorrow and longing. All the other non-transformed wolves heard her howl. It was so very human and so very Enid. The others recognized it for what it is. Pain. "Enid," came the hopeful voice. Ajax had opened the door slightly, one side of his face visible. They made eye contact and the feral wolf returned. She snarled as Ajax's eyes widened, slamming the door shut again, the bolt of the door being put back in place, for all the good that it would do. Her veins were on fire now. Her heart screaming for it to work its will, and it obliged. The door was beginning to buckle in on itself. "Dude, we need to get the principal," came Xavier's voice. Enid's savagery bared her teeth upon hearing it. Such an opportunity to rid herself of two problems at the same time was an excellent one. Ajax laughed nervously. "How, bro?" Xavier rolled his eyes in response. "With our phones, stupid," Xavier said, exasperated. The door shook with another collision where her growling could be heard from the other side. Until it suddenly stopped and both boys stood, with their breaths held as silence seemed to follow. "Do you think she's gone?" Ajax whispers shouted. Xavier sighed. "I don't know, dude, go look." His gestured to the door with a hand. "I'm not going, I went the first time." "You go," Ajax said, imitating the gesture. Wood exploded from the door, causing the two to shout in fright. A set of powerful claws had pierced the wood and could be seen from their side. They wiggled in place and until they were withdrawn, leaving 4 gaping holes in their door. Oh God, we're gonna die, Ajax said dejectedly. Are you a Gorgon or not? Xavier asked incredulously. Huh? He asked stupidly, until his eyes widened in realization. Oh right. Xavier opened his mouth to respond but never got the chance as the door was ripped from its hinges. The door slammed down onto the floor, casting dirt and dust into the air. The two of them anxiously cast their gaze to the door. A silhouette could be seen just beyond the threshold, and both backed up nervously as she stepped over it. The dust and debris came to settle down, revealing an enraged Enid. Enid, I'm sorry. Ajax tried, a futile attempt at calming her down, receiving a gnashing of fangs in return as she stalked towards him. I'm sorry, he said as he reached up towards his beanie. Xavier closed his eyes automatically, seeing the action. The beanie came free and Ajax felt relief as the snakes on his head hissed and writhed around the top of his head. But Enid's growled and plodding footsteps never ceased, and Ajax paled as he looked to the wolf to see that her eyes were closed. She knew, and she had countered it. He gulped as his greatest weapon had been nullified with no detriment to herself. A werewolf's senses were among the very best in the outcast world. Her nose wrinkled as she sniffed the air, before her head turned sharply towards him. He backed away, his shoes scuffling on the stone floor. It would have been a fatal mistake. Enid charged and leapt towards him, tackling him to the floor. Ajax looked on in fear as his ex-girlfriend said no words, said nothing but howled above him, her head craning towards the ceiling as the strength of the howling cry seemed to shake the room around her. Roaring her triumph to every beast and every predator. Roaring her triumph to Wednesday. Her body stood taut and stiff above him. Fingers and claws curled. She could smell his fear. And it tasted glorious. She hunched over above him. Her eyes still closed, to avoid being stoned by the snakes. Enid, stop! Came the stern voice laced with a hint of desperation. Wolf, Enid whimpered with her claws a mere inch away from Ajax's face. She pulled back. And Ajax shifted his eyes to the doorway to see Wednesday stood in the doorway, her eyes closed as well. Ajax! Wednesday hissed venomously in his direction. Put your ridiculous excuse for a hat back on before you stone the only person who may actually save your snakes from getting skinned. She commanded. Ajax hastily did what he was told and simply said done. Wednesday opened her eyes instantly to see Xavier looking between the three of them nervously. Her eyes rested upon Enid, who she carefully moved towards, making sure to make no sudden move that would startle the wolf. Enid. Open your eyes. Wednesday said quietly. The wolf obeyed. They fluttered open and landed directly upon her. They shimmered as they took her in. Wednesday rose her hand towards the wolf, silently telling her to come to her. With a final snap of her jaws, lunging towards him in a final warning, she moved slowly towards her mate. The one the moon had chosen for her above all others. The one that would come above all others. Wednesday Adams. She held her head low as fangs and claws began to shrink back to their regular size as she shuffled back to her. The wolf side of Enid came to a stop before her. Wednesday took her hands in her own to the shock of the wolf, who gasped in a very non-wolf-like way. Wednesday ran her hands over hers and her arms before cupping her face. Small whines and whimpers escaped her vocal cords, conveying everything she couldn't say. She tucked Enid's blonde hair behind her ears and buried her fingers into blonde locks, nails tracing her scalp, eliciting a shuddering gasp from the wolf girl. My wolf, Wednesday began, her voice soft, comforting. Are you okay? The wolf whimpered again into her touch, curling her head to press into her hand. Wednesday felt the tension leave her body as Enid yielded to her, stopping the wolf from committing an act she knew would haunt the blonde forever once she was made whole once more. Ajax watched on with both jealousy and pain. As stoned and slow as he was, even he realized that the girl he once thought was his belonged to another and always had done. Xavier steeled his jaw and swallowed, watching the two's stolen moment taking place right in front of him. Watching just how tender Wednesday was with Enid, watching the way he himself had once envisioned her being with him filled his belly a poisonous fire that seemed to eat away at his innards. The way her hands seemed to be soft and affectionate only for her. All things that only Enid could bring out of her. Something he would never be able to do. Enid pressed her head down into Wednesday's shoulder and rubbed her cheek against her, inhaling her scent. Xavier chewed on the inside of his jaw as that poisonous fire spread through his belly. No one got a free pass at touch like Enid did. I see you are unharmed, Wednesday commented before she lifted her hands again, examining her claws, specifically. Her nails slightly chipped at the end after tearing through solid reinforced wood. This posed an interesting metaphysical question: would her claws be in the same state once her body was whole again? Wednesday pondered it for a moment before shifting her gaze to the boy on the floor, who looked at her with a look of both heartbreak and venom. He slowly stood to his feet. Enid shifted her head to glare at him, growling as she did so. His glare intensified. What did you do to her? He spat, seething. Enid bared her teeth in response. Wednesday schooled her expression as neutrally as possible. Nothing that can't be fixed with a counterspell, she said. Ajax's eyes shifted to look behind her. Wednesday turned to see what Ajax was looking at. Sad Enid lingered around the edge of the doorframe, her hands tucked into her sleeve as she peered into the room, cautiously. Xavier laughed hollowly. Wow, even for you, Wednesday, this is a new low, he accused. It was not her fault, Sad Enid said quietly. It was an unfortunate accident I did not foresee, for which I am at fault, she admitted reluctantly. Ajax disregarded their conversation and took a step forward. Enid, he pleaded. But Sad Enid glowered at him and took a step back, making her stance quite clear. I told you this was an ill-advised course of action, Wednesday said, stepping forwards. Make another move and I'll let her finish the job of ripping you into shreds. I'm curious to see if my father was right, if snakes taste like chicken if prepared properly, she threatened. Ajax stiffened, seeing this was as futile as it was. Why don't you let her speak? Since when can't she speak for herself? Ajax hissed. The nature of the spell renders her incapable of full coherent thought to a degree. What the hell is that even supposed to mean? He asked, his voice raised and throwing his arms in the air in frustration. It means, you pathetic simpleton, that Enid's mind has been fractured into physical pieces, each of which doesn't possess a full emotional range. And I won't let you or anyone else. She glared at Xavier, who stared straight back at the open accusation. Take advantage of that. You think I would? Ajax asked incredulously, pointing at himself, his face amused with disbelief. Yes, Wednesday answered, not missing a beat. The mind is a fragile thing and hers is most precious of all, Wednesday declared. You broke up with her over an infernal text message, she snarled. Coward, she hissed. She looked him up and down in disgust. You are lower than the dirt you walk on, Xavier scoffed. Since when did you have her best interests at heart? He asked, glaring at her. All you do is use people, both me and especially her. I never asked for your help, and on every occasion I stated this explicitly. It's your own fault you can't understand when a girl says no, Wednesday sneered. Xavier looked shocked for a moment before his gaze hardened. What about Enid? You used her, he accused. I did, the seer admitted quietly, ashamed. Behind her, Sad Enid watched on intently. She forgave me, even though I didn't deserve it, even though I never asked for it, and I will never understand why she did. She sighed heavily at the end, her roommate's reason behind it still eluded her to this day. Why the sudden change of heart? Because we work, we shouldn't but we do. It's like some weird friendship anomaly. Except now, she knew it wasn't what she wanted. She wanted more. She needed more. And it was torture. Love wasn't always a happy ending. Sometimes it was sitting alone in a darkened room, heart pounding, feeling a pit in the bottom of your stomach and swallow you whole, heart yearning, soul pining, wanting that one person to make you whole. To make you live again. Pain was an old friend. And it was the only one she knew. The voice said, and Wednesday turned to look behind her. Sad Enid had pushed a little further into the room. She eyed Xavier and Ajax wearily before settling her eyes upon the Goth, her eyes pleading silently. Wednesday nodded subtlety. Before turning to look at the two of them. Mention what transpired here today and I will take great pleasure and time extracting every drop of blood from your near lifeless corpses. She turned on her heel, knowing her threat had been heard. And how do you expect us to explain this? Xavier exclaimed, gesturing towards the door. You'll think of something. Wednesday growled out between grit teeth. Enid growled in time with her breathing, creating a deep rumble that vibrated through Wednesday. How delightful! Sad Enid met Ajax's eyes. What Wednesday said was true, about me being fractured of whatever. But I know my mind, and my mind is telling you to go fuck yourself. Sad Enid hissed, her voice laced with hurt anger. Who breaks up with someone over text? She opened up her arms widely, tears brimmed there but they would not fall. Who does that? Enid cried out. Ajax could do nothing but swallow and hand his head in shame. I'm sorry, Ajax uttered. But Sad Enid narrowed her eyes angrily. Her body began to glow briefly, specks of light seemed to rise from her body. Wednesday's eyes widened slightly. Enid was none the wiser, however. Sorry doesn't cut it, Ajax, she hissed angrily, but her body finally gave way to tears, and as quick as it came, the light faded as sadness replaced the anger that festered there. What can I do? I'll do anything, name it. Ajax pleaded in a last, desperate attempt. Ajax. She began. Wednesday looked to her, providing her all the strength she needed, her presence invigorating her. Giving her courage beyond measure. Yeah. He crooned. Stay away from me, she said shakily. Wens. She said, her voice softer, more vulnerable with Wednesday. She looked back at Ajax once more, who looked completely defeated and broken. The sight filled Wednesday with a visceral pleasure. With Enid still clinging to her arm, she left the dorm, stepping around the broken-down door. Come, me soul. She whispered. But Sad Enid held up a hand, indicating for her to wait. She strode into the room straight up to Ajax, but she heard not the words she spoke. Their nature whispered like a secret across oceans. His face fell as she relayed the words to him, before she moved away. Xavier looked at Enid with venom, her words having affected him too. She turned her back on them, striding from the room, and clutching onto Wednesday's sleeve, taking them down the empty corridor. Leaving two stunned and speechless guys in their wake. Wednesday stood with her arms folded. It was midday now. She watched as Enid slept happily on Wednesday's bed. Surrounded by Wednesday's comforting scent. Sad Enid had resumed her drawing and coloring, the picture from before tucked away safely and out of sight. Wednesday sighed tiredly, this day having already taken a toll on her both mentally and physically. Sad Enid looked at her with worry. Wednesday rarely showed vulnerability, even in front of her. Until Wednesday reached under her bed and retrieved a small black case. She opened it to reveal various implements for brewing. She opened the small black book there and began to read its notes. 4 ounces of taproot. 1 ounce of graveyard dirt. 1 dollop of virgin's blood. 1 dollop of blood from the affected party. 16 fluid ounces of water. She read through the rest of the list and was pleased to see she had everything she needed right here. What is that? Sad Enid asked, peering over her shoulder. It's my emergency brew kit, Wednesday supplied as she began crushing taproot. Will that make me whole again? Enid asked hopefully. Wednesday paused. I hope so, but I will be honest, I don't know if it will work, but if the 24 hours elapses and you remain in this state, I will use this. She said. She withdrew her knife and Enid gasped as she pricked her finger, letting it hover the cauldron before letting a single drop fall into the basin. The liquid hissed and frothed as Wednesday's blood found its mark. Her virgin blood viable. Wednesday turned dark eyes to her. Your turn. Enid froze. Wait, what? Wednesday stood up and held her hands up. I'm not going to hurt you. She reached forward as Enid whimpered, but she held off. Do you trust me? Wednesday asked softly. Enid faltered but nodded as Wednesday reached forwards and pricked her finger. Enid hissed as her blood was drawn and her hand was hovered over the basin. A singular drop hitting the already frothing concoction, it immediately simmered with the presence of her blood. And now we wait, Wednesday said simply. We are to wait 6 hours for potion to brew, simmer and concoct. Now what? Sad Enid asked. I would like to sleep, it's been a tiring morning. Wednesday said with a sigh. Her eyes looked to the bed to see the incorrigible wolf had splayed out, leaving no room for her. Sad Enid realized this at the same time she had. You can always sleep on mine? Enid offered, a blushing mess. Being too tired to even protest, Wednesday settled herself on the bed and closed her eyes. There was silence for a minute as Enid fought a war with herself. Wednesday's eyes nearly shot open as she felt warm, tender arms encircle her waist from behind, another body pressing into her. Is this okay? Came Enid's voice, softly spoken into her ear. The pressure a comfort. Yes, she breathed out. Sad Enid settled in behind her, content. Her body began to glow again with a low luminescence. Though neither of them saw it. Wolf Enid awoke with a puppy yawn before looking for her mate. The moment she saw Wednesday on the other bed, she took to her feet, padded over to the other side of the room, avoiding the simmering cauldron on the floor and climbing onto the bed, the side of the mattress dipping under her weight as she turned about, facing Wednesday's chest. She tucked herself in under Wednesday's chin, falling instantly asleep. But sad Enid lay awake still. The words that she had spoken to Ajax haunted her in the truth and finality of it. No longer able to lie to herself any longer, Ajax no longer a shield from the truth. I care for her more than I do anyone else, and I will always choose her, no matter what. And I know now she would for me, even if she doesn't feel the same, that's okay. Because I will be by her side until forever. Because she's my mate.